Welcome to Conversations. My guest today is Linda Tracey. I'm going to go straight to you. Usually I do a little rigmarole on how I met people, but I did see a thing on the news about this project, and I'm still not exactly sure of the name, but it seemed so interesting, and the news being the news gave it such short shrift. I thought, this is the perfect thing for Conversations, where we have the time to talk in length about what is involved. So let's start with you telling me the name of it.
Greg, thanks for having me. I work for the Missoula Demonstration Project, and I think the project that you were looking at or hearing about most recently was the Choices Bank project that will create the first community-based electronic repository for advanced directives and then make them available to anyone who should have access to them at any time and from anywhere.
That is in the United States?
Anywhere you have access to the internet.
Are you fitting into an already national project that exists there, or are you starting? What is exactly going on there?
This is actually pioneering work that's being done right here in Missoula. The Missoula Demonstration Project was started to show the world that a community-based approach to taking care of one another at the end of life was a much better way of improving the quality of that experience than simply looking at the person and that person's physical needs, by recognizing that it's not just someone who is living with a serious illness or who is dying or who has died, but also the people around them and their experience of chronic illness, dying, death, and bereavement after that person has died.
Now, if it seems like I'm belaboring this, it's because I didn't know much, and I assume there are lots of other people that don't know that much. It seems, I get the impression that, for instance, Ira Byock is a national figure, and Tom King shows up, his picture in Modern Maturity, and which made me feel that maybe these people were plugged into some sort of national thing, and now I'm sort of, you're saying that these are, the Missoula really has developed something that is ahead of the rest of the country, and these people are national figures not because they're plugged into a national organization, but because they're doing something really important here in Missoula.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great.
And we're acting as a demonstration of what one community working together can accomplish as a model, as a demonstration to other communities across the country for what's possible in their own communities. So we have tools to offer these other communities. We have lessons learned to share with other communities while we're working to improve the quality of the end-of-life experience right here at home.
How did this come into being?
Our co-founders are Dr. Ira Byock and Dr. Barbara Spring. Ira is a medical doctor, Barbara's a gerontologist, and they believed that dying was not a medical event, but it becomes so much more so. And we wanted to reclaim for all of us the roles that we have to play in each other's lives toward the end of life. So we are a research and community engagement organization working with the community to change what happens at the end of life.
What is your relationship to the hospice program?
We don't do direct service. We work with the hospice program and the hospitals and all the healthcare institutions, with the faith communities, with the schools, with the attorneys in town, with people who are more directly involved with end-of-life experience, like the funeral home directors, and people who are less involved, schools, for instance, teachers and school administrators and school staff, because we all have a role to play in supporting one another.
You seem a bit disingenuous to me. All of these people that work on the Missoula Demonstration Project, it seems a lot of those people do care.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
They're bringing their experience as caregivers to the table. So you're sort of a think tank?
Well, you know, we bring people together who haven't been brought together before. For instance, on the Advanced Care Planning Task Force, a task force that's looking to try to make sure that people in our community will have their health care choices honored at the end of life. And when that task force first met, it was the first time that chaplains and social workers and doctors and nurses and attorneys and disability advocates and senior advocates ever sat down around the same table together to identify what the world looked like from their perspective and from the perspective of the people they serve, which are often the same people. So the same person who may be this attorney's client is this doctor's patient, and is also a member of this person's faith community. But they were each approaching from their own separate disciplines that person's needs in the advanced care planning realm.
Spin-offs from this now, the Missoula
Missoula Demonstration
Project.
Yes.
What are the ways that that has had practical, what has gone on to be turned into practical programs?
Okay. Well, let me first say that we base our work on research, and we have done the most comprehensive series of research studies that have ever been conducted in one place about the end-of-life experience. So we've conducted, I think, 15, maybe it's up to 16 now, research studies. So we have surveyed or interviewed doctors and attorneys and social workers and nurses and chaplains, funeral home directors. We've also done a community survey. People may recall having received a community survey some years ago. So we have an understanding of what the general population experience is, as well as specific segments of our community's population. And we use that research to help inform our community engagement work. We use that research to hold the mirror back up to the community to say, this is what you told us about your experience. This is what you told us about what you hope for, what you want. This is the gap between what you hope for and want and what you currently do and what you experience. We use the results of the research to help the community groups that we convene identify what they might want to do about this gap and to draw resources together to create solutions to narrowing those gaps.
Is participation, I assume you have a board?
We have a community-based board of volunteers. We also have several task forces that work together on a volunteer basis to identify these solutions and to bring resources together.
Do you have paid employees at some
Yes.
point? I'm sure you do.
On the Missoula Demonstration Project, we do have paid staff.
It sounds fascinating, and I just am amazed that it's going on here.
Mm-hmm. Missoula's a remarkable place.
We came here for one specific program, and let's talk about that. The name of it is?
Well, the Choices Bank is something that we're just getting funding to start. So I want to come back in a year from now when we actually have the Choices Bank up and running. But perhaps today what we could talk about are the My Choices form, or an advanced directive form. That's something that each adult should really fill out, and the Choices Bank that we create in the coming year will be a place for people to deposit their completed advance directives so that they would always have access to them when they needed them.
Can we talk a bit about the needs for this?
Yes, certainly. I think that that's a good place to start. Actually, this is not really a document that your grandparents would have necessarily needed in caring for your parents. Much has changed in the way that our medical capacity is developed in terms of our treatments and our medical equipment and our drugs that help people live much longer, much more productive lives, even with very serious illnesses that at one time would have killed them. And so now as we live longer lives, we are often in a different kind of a situation at the end of life. It used to be that pneumonia, for instance, was called the old man's friend, because people could live quite healthy lives and then be ill for a very short period of time and then die. And that's less and less the case now. Now people may live for very long periods of time with multiple chronic illnesses. And so at the end of life, often people are not able to make their own decisions and to communicate their wishes. And we know from our research right here in Missoula that 40% of people who die in Missoula are not able to make their own decisions. And some studies that have been done in other parts of the country have identified as many as 50% of people who aren't able to make their own decisions. So someone will have to make decisions for that person at the end of that person's life. Who will that person be? And how will they know what their loved one would have wanted. We have a very unique situation in the United States in that we have the right to accept or refuse medical treatment, even if we're too sick or too injured to speak for ourselves or to make our own decisions. And so we take those two pieces and we look at how can we extend people's ability to communicate what they would want and to make their own decisions, even if they are too sick or too injured to speak for themselves. And that's where an advance directive comes in. That's a document that communicates who you would want to make decisions for you if you couldn't make them yourself. And then if you were at the end of your life, what kind of care you would or would not want to have. And together, those two parts create an advance directive. Many people may be familiar with the terms power of attorney for health care, which designates a decision maker, or living will, which identifies the kind of care you would or wouldn't want at the end of life.
You're asking, I'm preparing questions and you're answering them without my even asking. I'm saying, how does that fit
sorry,
in?
I'll
No. But I was going to say, how does that fit in with living will and power of attorney?
You were right on the same
You went
page.
right there, yeah. The thing that I was just so intrigued by when I saw this thing in the news was the idea that this could turn into something that was national. And so if I was on vacation and had an accident, that there's a possibility that the kinds of decisions that I would have made here would apply there. And I found that just
Yes.
really...
Well, one of the challenges when people do fill out their advance directive is that they often sign it and get it witnessed or notarized, and then they put it in a very safe place. And then other people can't find it when they need it, or you forget where you put it, or you move, and it was in that drawer, but now I'm living in another apartment or house, and it's in a box, and I don't know where it is. And I don't know what it says anymore because it's been a while since I've
and
signed
if it's
it.
applicable, and the friend that you may have chosen may have moved, all of that.
That's a really good point.
Or you don't like that friend anymore. I don't have much problem. Everyone I talk to says they'd be quite willing to pull the plug on me. So, I heard that laughing back there, and then so this is not a national thing. This is something that's starting here.
The Choices Bank, and I'm sorry, I want to make sure that I don't confuse you or your audience. The advance directive is the document that we want people to fill out, this My Choices form that we'll talk about a little bit later. What happens with this My Choices form or this advance directive form is often that people do put it in a safe place and others can't have access to it. We are trying to create a solution to that problem, and we're calling that solution the Choices Bank. And that Choices Bank will be this electronic repository that will make the advance directives available. And we just got a grant in the last 30 days, actually, to get started on designing and implementing and then rigorously evaluating this solution, this Choices Bank solution, this repository, this internet site that will be available to people who should have access to the information, but not available to everybody.
See, that was my next question. Is it going to be protected?
Yes.
My life is an open book, but I can imagine a lot of people, for various reasons, wouldn't want, let's say, some of their children to know what they wanted. That, maybe they don't trust their children and have someone else, and they might not want their children to know that that's not a decision they would want to give. And any number of reasons I could imagine that people would not want that information. So security will be a prime part of that. Now, is this just medical? How far can this go? Or maybe as we fill this out, we'll
This is just healthcare
find out.
decision making, and there are other steps that you would want to take, and you would have to take through an attorney to actually do, or you should take through an attorney to do your financial planning, some sort of a last will and testament that would dispose of property, or a financial power of attorney to have someone else make those financial decisions for you. What we're talking about here today is just strictly medical decision making.
Right. Okay. I was thinking, as I've done a lot of thinking about this since we talked that we were going to do this. One of them would be, for me, is would I want to stay alive long enough for certain people to get there?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You know, and is that something that, can I say, yeah, keep me alive until Ed and my family and the rest of them get here, and then let me go?
Yes.
Or,
yes, and that's a really good point. And that's something that people might want to consider for their own planning. And that's certainly something that is a factor in many people's end-of-life experiences.
is the hope then that this will take off nationally?
The hope is that what we create from this community-based repository will be a model that can be used in other communities. Because most of your focus, most of your health care is probably taken care of right here in Missoula.
Yeah.
Right? So
Same
most
doctor for years.
Right.
And, yeah.
Right. And you probably would go to the same one of the same hospitals, one of the 2 hospitals in town. And so what we are saying is that the system that we'll develop that will involve a series of places that you can bring your completed advance directive to, we're calling them portals or the deposit sites, are places where you can have some of your questions asked and answered, are places where someone will take a look at your completed advance directive and make sure that it's legible, make sure that you've completed the parts that need to be completed, make sure that you've signed it and dated it and had a witness or had it notarized.
Well, Linda, this is your booklet, right?
Yes.
And you can get this by doing what?
Well, you can get this booklet from either our website, which is www.missoulademonstration.org, or at one of the hospitals here in Missoula, or through Western Montana Clinic, Missoula Aging Services. Some of the other best places to get this might be through, say, Partners in Home Care, or the Nightingale Nursing Services, another home care agency here in town. And you can certainly get individual black and white versions of this colored printed document from our website.
Mm-hmm. And the form is within the booklet?
Yes, it is.
I'm going to get to this form here in just a second, but I want to ask you, since this is starting here, I thought this was a national thing. This is starting here. How long before or will ever it happen that I'm on vacation and this information will be available to them? Or will I carry a card that says they can get, this is for?
The answer to your question is both. You will be getting a card when we have the Choices Bank repository up and running, which we anticipate will be next fall. You will be given a card if you have deposited your advance directive into that bank, if you will. And you will be able to use that card or the personal identification number on that card and the information or the instructions on that card to access your advance directive yourself. If you were ever to be in a situation in a hospital, they would not need your personal identification. So if they didn't find your wallet card for the Choices Bank, but you were being hospitalized here in Missoula, for instance, they would just automatically go to the Choices Bank to check to see if you had an advance directive on file with the Choices Bank. If you were away from home, somebody probably would have to look in your wallet to look for the Choices Bank card. But if your family or friends were called, if you talked to them and informed them about the Choices Bank and where you had put your advance directive, then they could also direct the hospital to look for that document there for you.
So we're going to go through this, and I'm actually going to fill this out. I think we have enough time. So I do this. I should, for instance, let my parents know that I've done this.
Yes, yes.
Because I might be somewhere and they would be the first people to be notified, and
Yes.
they could tell the hospital in New Orleans or whatever.
Yes. So the first step is really identifying what is important to you. What are your life values and goals? Who would you want to step in for you to make decisions for you? Second step is really to look at documenting those decisions on an advance directive form. And then the third step is just what you were talking about, this whole notion of talking to everyone in your life who counts. Everyone that you imagine would need to know everyone who might be gathered at your bedside if you were very ill, very injured, or at the end of your life. And make sure that each one of those people knows what's important to you, knows who it is that you have designated to be your decision maker if you can't make your own decisions, and why you picked that person, and some of the information about what you've said to that person to guide him or her in making those decisions. So that if you ever were in that situation, that people would be on the same page. They may want different things for themselves, but they would know what's important to Greg and wouldn't have that conflict that we can see when this kind of planning hasn't been done, when those kinds of conversations haven't taken place.
Great.
Well, let's first look, before you start filling in the form, let's go to some of the background.
All right.
And this booklet, this My Choices booklet, at the end of the booklet gives you some information about some of the things you might want to consider thinking about when you're making your decisions. And I think perhaps in a television context, you may or may not want to necessarily answer the question, but it would give people a sense of what the questions are.
I've talked about my alcoholism on this show. I've done all kinds of things.
Okay.
I'm sure you'll find it.
It's your
There's
call.
not much that I
Okay.
am going to keep.
Okay. Well, the first of the questions is really, how do you feel about your current health?
I'm HIV positive, but I've never had much physical problem with it. My lungs are more likely to take me, so depends on the day you talk to me, and my lungs kick up, and also being an alcoholic, I could step out in front of something while I was drinking, or could fall down and hurt myself and bleed to death. So general health, yes, but the possibility that something could happen any day is something that I look at, I guess.
Right. Well, another question is, well, how important is independence and self-sufficiency in your life?
Not all that important. I mean, I wouldn't mind being bedridden. People come and go and talk to me and care for me. As long as my mind is sound and I can watch TV and read books and interchange with my friends, I don't mind. You know, I'd rather not be paraplegic, but I mean, I think I wouldn't want to end things just because I couldn't get around or something like that.
Great. And recognize, people who are listening to this, that there might be people who are saying, yes, that's exactly my feeling as well. And there may be other people who are watching and say, no, that's not at all what I would want. And it's not to say that if they agree with you, that's good, and if they disagree with you, that's bad. It's to say that we each have our own life values and goals, and it's about deciding what yours are and communicating them to the person that you're asking to make decisions for you and to the other people who count in your life. So the idea of imagining how you would handle illness, disability, dying, and death, how would you imagine you're facing that? It seems like you've actually had some experiences that have given you some.
I've faced death a number of times, and it doesn't hold any real fear for me. I even had an out-of-body experience where I was watching them perform on me, and of course been in pain at times that was so excruciating that I wouldn't mind going. You know, I know that in that particular time. Disability is a whole different question. But again, I don't think, as long as I can find someone to care for me or interact with them, it doesn't bother me.
We've talked earlier, before we started the show, about how we might answer these questions very differently when we're 21 years old versus the age the ages we are right now.
I can imagine a 21-year-old who's athletic and in his prime looking at disability as something really terribly frightening. Worse than death, perhaps.
Well, and it's important to continue asking yourself these questions throughout your life and communicating
I see what you're...
as your life situation changes, as you age, as we go through.
And this is access to this and to change is fairly easy.
Yes, you always have the right to change your advance directive. You can even change it orally by saying, tear that up. It's no longer, I want to revoke the advance directive that I signed. You can always sign a new advance directive, and the advance directive that is in force is the one that's most recently signed, or if you've revoked it, then you don't have one in force.
But I mean, it's not like I have to go to the box in banks. I'm having trouble with, where you put your valuables in the bank.
Yes.
Whatever box that's called. You don't. It's not like you have to go dig something out and get other people involved to redo it.
Right.
It's a simple project.
Right. Right.
Other questions?
So some of the other questions are thinking about how might your personal relationships affect medical decision making, especially near the end of life.
Not sure.
Well, you talked about, for instance, that your mom and dad are far away, that you have close friends here in the community that you are seeing on a more daily basis who might know you better than mom or dad might. And some of that may influence who you might choose to be your designated decision maker. Some of those relationships.
We also talked, I'm not so sure, but I might want to hold on, if possible, until family could get there or something.
Mm-hmm. And that would be a good thing to make note of in your advance directive as well.
In other words, if I could be kept alive for a day or two and then have it withdrawn, if possible.
Yes. And then what role should doctors or other health professionals play in those medical decisions for you?
I've had the same doctor for a long time, and we get along quite well. He's been on this show. He's met at various times friends of mine in the hospital, so I would think that he and my civilian friend would cooperate on this.
Great. Now, for some people, they don't have that kind of long-term relationship, and so they might have a very different answer. Or for other people, especially many older people I've talked to, have often told me, well, my doctor knows best, that there is a sense of really this is the doctor's role to make this decision. And again, these questions can help you identify for yourself and for those around you what your thinking is on that. On that.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a good, strong relationship, long-term relationship with your physician.
But he's not perfect, so
Great. What kind of living environment would be acceptable to you if you became seriously ill or disabled? Would you want to live in a nursing home or assisted living facility or receive in-home care? You've begun to talk a little bit about that in some of your earlier answers.
I'm not too fussy. For instance, I live alone, so I'm not all that, it doesn't make that much difference whether one person is, you see what I'm saying? I'm not dependent on a boyfriend or wife or whatever who is tied to that place, and so I want to be in that place. I think that in an assisted living or something like that, I could probably get along with that.
Great. How much should the cost to your family be part of the decision-making process?
I'm not so sure that they are responsible for that cost, or am I wrong?
I think this question is one that relates to what I've heard some people say. They're concerned that the cost of their end-of-life medical care will go through so much of their assets that they won't have anything to leave their families. And so for some people, that may be a value,
of course,
maybe an issue or concern.
So
for others, it may not be.
So if you, I wasn't even thinking of that. I have a small life insurance policy that should cover, cremation or burial or whatever. I haven't decided on that, but I had never thought about having enough money to leave someone. If I did, I can see how it would change things, but I don't.
What role do religious or spiritual beliefs play in the decisions about your health care?
I'm tempted to say none, and yet I belong to a church, and a lot of the people in the church are close to me. But I don't have any I'm a congregationalist. You know, we're pretty loose. I mean, I wouldn't mind having Peter there, but I don't feel that there's any specific ritual that has to be done, or any particular care of my body because of my religious tradition or something like that.
Well, and here again, others of your viewers may have very strongly held religious beliefs that will inform what they would want or not want at the end of life or after they've died. So this might be more a question that is more important to some people than it is to other people.
Yeah.
Right. And then the last question is really, what are your thoughts about living life's final stages? What are your hopes and what are your fears?
Final stages as in final minutes or months and weeks?
We leave that up to your, and you may answer this question at different times, and I've just sprung this question on you, and you may need some reflection time and want to come back to that at another time.
Today, I can see dying as rather an adventure, something to, when the time comes, to welcome and see what happens. I have a few people in particular I promise to come back and haunt if it's at all possible. Fears, I think any fears might be in the last months or something, but because I don't have one person in my life, but have a wide variety of friends that I rely on, that I might lose them in some way. I guess that would be my biggest fear. But
So you wouldn't, is that an isolation kind of, you're afraid that you won't?
Yeah, maybe once they got bored of coming to see me in the hospital after the first week or two, that, they would quit coming and I would be there by myself week in, week out. I don't think that. I have some pretty decent friends. I'm pretty sure they'll come around.
Well, these questions and questions like these are designed to help you be thinking about what's important to you, what you value. And it's these kinds of questions that you would want to talk about with particularly the person you want to designate as your decision maker. So let's shift over to choosing the person you would want to make medical decisions for you if you couldn't make them for yourself. And here again, we've got some other questions that can help you to narrow that list down that you might have in your mind. And again, this person is only going to make decisions for you that relate to health care, and it's only going to be able to make those decisions if you can't make them yourself. And if you were to be able to regain the ability to make your decisions again, that person's authority would disappear, and you would again be the person making your own decisions. So this is only when you can't speak for yourself, whether it's a temporary situation or an end-of-life situation. So in thinking about who you would want to make those decisions for you, think about, is this person willing to take on this role, make these decisions for you? So you want to make sure that they would be willing, and part of that is also to ask them. I read a study once where people had not, 30% of the people in this one particular study had never told the person that they had designated them to be their decision maker on their advance directive form, and yet they would be the person called if the decision needed to be made.
Thoughtless and cruel, I think, to me, by my way of thinking.
Well, I don't know whether it was an oversight or the study didn't go into why they didn't make didn't inform that person. So is that person willing to be your representative? The second question is, have you discussed your life values and healthcare wishes with this person? And that would be something that you'd want to do. Certainly you'd want to go over your advance directive form with that person once you've signed it as well. Is he or she willing to and capable of following your directions?
That was one I thought of immediately.
Okay, so that crystallized it for you.
Well, I mean, I have one friend who is not unsentimental and certainly loves me as much as anyone else, but I just have the feeling that he would react to what he thought was best for me and would be able to do that. Although when his cat died recently, it was such a major event, maybe I shouldn't.
Well, the last question is really, can this person make difficult decisions under stress? The advance directive does not take away all the difficulty of the end-of-life experience, but it can make it easier. But it's still going to be a challenging time. And can this person be your advocate, make these decisions on your behalf, even if other people might disagree with what, you've used the pronoun he, what he is advocating or deciding on your behalf? Because he's got to be able to keep clear in his mind what your wishes are, what you would want, even if that's a little different from what he would want for you. And even if that's a little different than what someone else in the room might want for you. So is that person strong enough in those difficult times to keep in mind what it is you wanted and to speak on your behalf?
I think so.
Good. Okay. Well, then the next step then, if you've got that person in mind, is to name that person on this form. And the My Choices form we've just pulled out of the booklet here. And you're completing the first page. And the first section on the first page is the healthcare representative. And you're naming this person in a power of attorney for healthcare. And here you will want to include the person's name, address, and phone number. And if he has a work phone number, to include that as well.
He's out in the other room, actually. I can ask him about
Great.
that. Alternate representatives?
Yes. So here you've named someone to make your decisions for you, but if he were not available, or if he were unwilling to act for you, or if you had been married to this individual and now you were legally separated or divorced and might not want this person to act on your behalf, who's your second?
I think I put my doctor down as second, because I expect my doctor to work with my friends anyway. So.
Okay, great.
Put him down for Western Montana Clinic. We may not fill this whole thing out, but
Okay,
give
great.
people
We
an
can
idea.
get the idea.